Burn the Box, a portal to the world of hidden truths and untapped power. A sanctuary where together we unmask the oppression hidden in the shadows far too long. Unscripted, unplanned, unrehearsed. Stay tuned for powerful conversations, thought-provoking insights as we ignite the sacred rebellion of the global majority. Let's begin this incredible journey together. Welcome to Burn the Box. Your host, Dr. Sonali Deepika.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Burn the Box. And I'm here with my lovely colleague and friend, Evvie Ormon. Evvie is committed to movement work centering on the emotional and mental well-being of Black folks, others in BIPOC and disabled communities. With a strong sense of imagination and a keen perception for generative discussions on group dynamics, Evvie shows up for others through the practices of plant medicine and food preparation. They've worked with groups in the US and UK and have extensive experience in somatics and other trauma healing practices. Welcome, Evvie. So happy to be here with you.
Thanks, Nolly. It's good to be here and I'm excited.
Me too. And maybe I will just share one other thing, because I am having these conversations with several members of our community of somatic abolitionism. And for some, when we hop on this recording, this podcast, it's the first time I'm connecting with them. And with you, I'm honored that we've been meeting this year, at least weekly in our quad, and that we've had several discussions on our own. And so it means a lot. and it might shift to the nature of our flow, because I do know more about you.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I usually start with, as this podcast is about burning boxes and about expanding out of spaces that may feel contracted and constricted, about liberation from embodied oppression. I wonder what's alive for you now with regards to that.
Yeah, well, as you know, one of the things that makes me feel alive and connected to the universe is astrology and following the patterns of the moon and the stars and the planets. And I am just aware that today is, the day that we're speaking is the new moon in Leo. And so that means the sun and the moon are both in Leo today, and Venus is also retrograde in Leo. So a lot is happening in that sign. And so it feels, for me, being a Scorpio rising and having my midheaven in Leo, that is the area of my life that represents my career in public life. And the things that I release out into the world. And so it feels really exciting to be having a conversation with you today, because I'm very much feeling that energy of like, what is it that I want to share with the world? And I am excited that I get to talk to you, because I enjoy our conversations already. So I think it's going to be great.
Oh, I'm so excited. And I always appreciate how astrology gets woven into all of our conversations. I learn so much from you. And as we're here talking, and as you mentioned, all the things you mentioned, the new moon in Leo, Venus retrograde, for me, it just reminds me of how in my own life, part of this like burning boxes for me has been about, and it's a deep path, and it's continuing for sure, but a path of allowing myself to be seen and heard, and allowing myself to be expansive, and just in doing that, also bearing witness to like all the layers, all the oppression that I hold. And I know that it's not all mine. Yes, a lot of it is, but it's also like this intergenerational aspect. It's, you know, as we talk about in somatic abolitionism, it's like this historical, intergenerational, pervasive, persistent, like these factors that have made it dangerous for I guess it's dangerous is the word that comes to in bodies of culture to be seen in this way, because there is something that I know I hold of like, oh, I could be, something bad could happen, could be, you know, persecuted in some way, or, you know, it's an edge that comes every time I try to show up in a different way, or I try to expand a bit more, I always face it. So I don't know. I think for me, as you share about the astrology, it's like, yeah, this is a big deal to share in this way, something that we're going to put out, if we choose to put out, you know, for others to witness.
Yeah, I feel similarly, and I resonate with what you talked about, like as far as the danger that's or like possible persecution. And I'm not sure if you're speaking specifically about like, you know, paying attention or like embodying astrology, but for me, there has been, you know, my choice to start learning about astrology just really, you know, less than 5 years ago, like intentionally learning about it. And it was a choice towards liberation. And part of how that happened for me was that an elder, a Black queer elder in my community in Seattle, introduced me to, or reminded me, I guess, that, you know, astrology and just paying attention to the stars is something that is ancestral for us, but it was something that in the process of colonization, we were told like it's not true, it's witchcraft, it's, you know, and so these sorts of ancestral practices of honoring the cycles of the sun and the moon and the stars were looked at as wrong, like being against whatever the religion of the colonizers were. And so, and in my case, it was like a very kind of like Protestant fundamentalist Christian religion. And so I was taught not to pay attention to these things. And I even found as an adult that I had some resistance to learning more about astrology, because I was like, well, it's not true, it's, you know, it's not scientific or whatever. And this queer Black elder said to me, who benefits from you ignoring the sky? Like, you know, the sky is above us, it's like part of our habitat. And I hadn't really ever thought of it like that. And then she also shared or reminded me that our ancestors, how they found their way to liberation, you know, when they were enslaved, was by following the stars and using the stars to navigate, and even paying attention to like the moon cycle, and knowing that a full moon was maybe not the best night to like try to run away, but a new moon would be a great night for that, because the sky is darker and there's less light for, you know, people who might be looking for someone to escape. And also that, you know, those of us who practice following moon cycles know that the new moon is also a time for planting seeds and for new beginnings. And so it does make sense that in the cycle of the moon that might be a night that someone would decide to escape to their liberation. And so when she shared that with me, it just really, I was like, wow, I've never thought of astrology like that before, as like me reclaiming some of my ancestral heritage and like how well my ancestors would have needed to know the sky in order to navigate by it. Like I can't say I know the sky well enough to navigate to know what direction north and south and east and west are. And so I just did something really moved me as far as that and really changed my perspective. And it made me feel okay with pursuing this curiosity that I always had for astrology. And it's kind of like I had set aside 6 months at first. I was like, I'm just going to study astrology for 6 months. I got Shani Nicholas's book, We Were Born for This, because it had just come out. And then I just was so fascinated by it. I never stopped learning. And so it's become one of my special interests that I'm like always, researching and learning about different placements in my own chart and other people's charts and what's happening in the current time. And I've just found it a very healing part of my practice and of liberating myself from all of these, like what you were talking about, the historical and the institutional trauma and the personal traumas that I've experienced.
I love that. I love just hearing about how there was a desire, there was a curiosity and a desire, and then the more you leaned into that, even though it had nothing to do with like the way you were, your upbringing or any kind of a value that was in your conditioning, that it was something else, but then it has really been a way to lead you to this deeper understanding of reclaiming part of your ancestry and of feeling more liberated yourself by knowing this information and the connection to I find it fascinating, the stars and the cycles and the meaning that it has to us as a whole population, but then also individually depending on how it shows up. That's so beautiful. It reminds me a little bit of as you were talking, like there was just a piece that was for me when I first learned about Ayurveda, which was about 10 years ago, and I didn't know anything about it because it really had gotten very suppressed during colonization of like Sri Lanka and India. But that the more I learned, that is what got me out of like work I was doing and got me closer to my own roots and like a different way of viewing healing. But I love when we have these like pearls that we start to follow and kind of see where they take us.
Yeah, I feel like part of my finding liberation was just being willing to pursue what was interesting to me and not have it need to be something that was like for a job or to, win at capitalism or something. It was just like, I'm curious about this. I've always wondered. I'm going to study it and learn more about it and dedicate myself in a similar way that I might dedicate myself to something professional, but I'm doing it just for myself. And there is something that feels really, both liberating and also now that I have a greater understanding, I found that paying attention to what is happening in the sky presently can give me clues of like when it's a good time to share something or when it's a good time to have a conversation. And it actually has supported my relationships in ways that feel really liberating as well. And so I'm grateful for the challenge that the person in my community offered to me because it helped open up a whole new world of possibilities that I didn't even know was there for me. And while for me it was astrology, I'm sure for it was astrology and then, also plant medicine to a large extent, which those things overlap in my experience. Moon has a lot of impact on plants and There are
Yes.
plants that are associated with different planets and different, types of energy, that just in my journey towards, mm, I guess how Resmo would say, like remembering I feel like astrology particularly has served me, in just the clues along the way. And so I, I think reflecting on that, and maybe even with some of what you shared about the danger, but also perhaps a stubbornness or decision to move forward anyway. If those feel like Leo qualities, because Leo is very like courageous and demonstrative, and it makes sense that like in a Venus retrograde, when we're that energy of like pleasure and creativity is focused more inwards, that we would be reflecting on how those things have supported us, or notice when things are not supporting us, and make decisions to let go of those things, in a mindful way, because of the reflection that this time is supporting for all of us if we take advantage of that.
Yeah, I appreciate the reminder about being courageous, because I do think when we start to like connect to our bodies more, as this work, I mean, different work, but definitely the work we met through the somatic abolitionism invites us to do, we start to listen to something deeper calling us. And like you said about astrology, I felt the same thing with Ayurveda. That wasn't part of that was something I just kind of came across. I was already working and doing things. But when we start to like listen and then allow ourselves to be guided and actually take steps that take us out of our comfort zone. You and I are both in different countries than we've been, raised in. And like, it's just having that courage despite fears, doubts, and other things, but just for me, I feel like it's just that inner, like an inner knowing that's like, okay, take this step and take this. So not to say it's easy, it's a lot of uncertainty for me anyway. But yeah, I appreciate that reminder that we're being supported in that now.
Yeah. And I think I had mentioned plant medicine being a part of that journey too.
Yeah.
And when I think of courage, there are two plants that come to mind, like plant ancestors that I have been working with actually since I started my journey, to immigrate from the US. One of them is well, I guess I should say a mushroom that I brought with me, which is lion's mane. And lion's mane is it's called lion's mane, and one of the things that lion's mane does is to support our nervous system. Like it's an adaptogen, and so it helps just soothe our nervous system, like our literal nerve fibers, but it also has something called nerve growth factor in it, which actually helps our nerves to regrow. And so it can be helpful for, treating things like nerve damage. But on a spiritual or more energetic level, lion's mane is known as a mushroom that gives us courage, like that it. And I have certainly noticed, in working with lion's mane, that if there's a situation where I just, am feeling anxiety over, especially anxiety that's connected to fear of the future, or of something happening, that lion's mane can kind of even that out and give me extra space so that I am not feeling so much overwhelm. And it also can be helpful for focus. And so I really enjoy that plant, or that mushroom. And then, even though I do consider it plant medicine, and then another plant that I directly associate with courage is the plant borage. And it's interesting because the day that I left the US, and I went to a friend in Mexico, and I was standing outside her house, and I saw these beautiful purple flowers that were in her yard. And I was just like, they were just calling to me, like something, I just felt so curious about them. And I used, one of the apps I have, you can scan plants. And I was like, what is this plant? 'Cause I asked my friend and she wasn't sure. And that's how I learned about how I got to see borage for the first time when it was still growing. I had worked with borage before in its dry form, but of course it looks different,
Yeah.
And I was just like, wow, this is so interesting, because it felt like courage was actually specifically what I needed in that moment, because I was right at the beginning of this very, unexpected journey. And so my friend actually was in a similar place, having also immigrated to Mexico. And so we ended up sitting down together, or collecting some of the flowers and stems, and then drying them. And then a week later, we made a tincture together with the borage. And it really felt like this plant just like invited us, that this plant was like, we're here for you. And there are these beautiful flowers that are purple flowers that are shaped like stars. And so I've been working with borage actually specifically ever since I transitioned to living outside of the US, and also lion's mane, and like just kind of having an ongoing conversation with those plants. And so that though they both feel important to bring up for the energy that's in the space today, because I have felt like, reflecting on my lineage and like how I have gotten to where I am in my journey I like to include plants. I like to include my plants as some of the supports and ancestors that have moved me towards liberation.
That it makes me, for sure, I don't know how that, but I was for sure would like to find those. In fact, I do think I have lion's mane as you were talking. Like I bought it some time ago, and I think for focus was what is calling to me, but I don't, like, I haven't looked at it or thought about it for a long time, but it makes me just, I feel this like yearning for, this support would be helpful, for me, for where I am. And, maybe for a lot of people, like we can use support, like a natural support for courage, for taking steps on our path, for stepping outside of boxes, burning boxes, whatever that looks like, it is more of a brave path, I think.
Yeah, and it does require, I think, particularly for bodies of culture, following our own curiosity and following what we're interested in, and making choices that are honoring our own liberation. They do require courage. It's not the easy choice. And it's often something that we're discouraged from doing, even sometimes from within our own people, because of that fear of not being aligned with the powers that be, or the status quo, and the retribution that many of them have experienced because of making different choices, or maybe even making the choices they made because they weren't allowed to make other choices.
Yeah, definitely. I can feel how it's kind of like that collective fear, that for me, like I just sense it as a part of survival, like a survival mechanism. But it's like, something that tells us stay small, stay hidden, do what is, like, stay under the radar, just kind of follow these basically like forces of repression that have been upheld for a long time. Just stay there because that's safe. But then I think for those of us who are on different paths and who are doing, somatic abolitionism work and other work that's like really about like, no, we don't want to stay in the oppression.
Yeah. It's true. And sometimes I think about where I am now and how I feel like over the course of at least the time that I intentionally started focusing on my own, like, healing my own wounds, which I felt I got a lot of clarity around that, even from astrology, because when I looked at my birth chart, my sun is conjunct Chiron. So by only, I think, 1 or 2 degrees. So really close conjunction in my 8th house, which I'm just like, wow, universe, that's rude. Like, how could you?
Not the easy path.
Yeah, and Chiron is the planet that, considered the wounded healer. It's a dwarf planet, I think. And so represents like our core wound, and like having my sun, which is my like self and my ego, like, essentially conjunct my core wound. Like I've definitely felt that over the course of my life. And so it gave me some clarity. I was like, wow, life has been rough. Like I have struggled, and the sky also supports that was kind of with the expectation on some level. But there's also the fact that, in traditional or in modern astrology, Chiron is considered also the place where we have the power to heal others. And so from the place that we have experienced our deepest wounds, that we are able to offer healing to others in that same space as we work through in our own healing. That was really instructive for me, because I always had this sense of looking for something more, or looking, or like have of something in my gut telling me that more was possible, that more liberation was possible. And that feeling is what kind of motivated me to pursue the things I was curious about. And I think the very first place that I found that where I was hearing something that sounded true was when I discovered emergent strategy, written by Adrienne Maree Brown. And I remember just like reading that book and working my way through it very slowly, actually over the course of a year, because it just felt like so much was there. I had to keep rereading the pages and just be like, I don't think I took all of that in. I need to read that again. And then also recognizing that what was written in emergent strategy really was a beautiful summary of a lot of things that people in my lineage had already been practicing, and maybe like it wasn't articulated. And Adrienne says that in the book, that emergent strategy is something that she was able to collect from witnessing, nature and the cycles of nature, and the ways that certain animals move, and the way that mycelium is collaborative with other species. And so that felt really affirming. And I also was able to meet other people through emergent strategy who had a similar worldview and were on similar paths. And that really, I'm so grateful for, because it launched me in the direction of movement work that was not just about, action, but about reflection as well, and balancing those things, which is something that Grace Lee Boggs, who was a mentor of Adrienne and a teacher of hers, and now of mine, by virtue of her writing and the other things that she put out into the world. Like Grace always talked about, that movement, some movements, and especially in the US, for racial justice had overvalued action and undervalued reflection. And that we really need both, because if we're not reflecting, then where it's like there's movement happening, movement work, but where is the movement going? And are we able to like strategically, move towards a future that we want instead of just reacting to what's happening? And I was just like, yeah, that is what I like. I want a more mindful future than the kind of world we live in now, where I look around and I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like, why would we do this? This is not a good idea,
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, that felt like the beginning of my journey. I look back on that, and at the time I didn't know, where it would lead me, but I'm grateful for having found emergent strategy and, Grace Lee Boggs and people like Octavia Butler, who also inspired emergent strategy, which both of those people I found because I was connected to the emergent strategy community and was reading Adrian's writing. They sent me on a path towards more liberation and less constriction, because that's how in my body, when I feel, when I imagine liberation, what I imagine is that my joints are looser and my muscles can relax, and that there's space in my body that then can radiate that space, and the choices that are available when I have more space radiate outward into my relationships and my community.
Thank you. As you were mentioning about movement and reflection, first of all, yes, like so much yes to that. And for me, really, it's just been the last 5 years or something. I found movement is a good way to say it. Like movement, there's action, there's something that we do, and it could be a practice, it could be something, that we're actively doing. And then for me, I found that it's so important to have integration, like space for integration, because our I don't know, I just want to say the culture, that's not a great word, but like I guess in the US, it just seemed like the culture, it's like go, 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 push, 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 just keep doing and doing and doing. And it doesn't value like pausing, like reflecting, integrating, and then then coming to a place where the next conscious step, the next available step, the next like embodied step becomes clear, and then it's like, okay, to do that. And also when you mentioned about like how you feel in your body with liberation and the spaciousness, I'm also aware of like having, especially in these last few years, like noticing contraction and expansion and contraction and expansion, and that it being inherent to this kind of path, that we're talking about. I mean, the path is different for everyone, but like a general path towards liberation, I suppose, it's like the contraction. I know I've gotten sometimes when the contraction comes, it feels awful. And, I'm like, oh, I'm back. It, sets me back, or I'm just like, how am I'm not moving forward, but it's really not like a linear path. No. It's a different kind of path.
Yeah, it is. I really enjoy that you said, that it's not linear, because that, I mean, that takes me right back to emergent strategy, of the non-linear and iterative principle in that book. And part of the recognition of things not being linear is also a way of burning boxes, of like resisting that kind of linear way of moving or thinking that we have all been conditioned into under like Western European colonization. Because that is the worldview of like things just moving in a straight line, there being this kind of like clear escalation. And unfortunately, it's not necessarily forward thinking in the sense of like thinking about where the escalation is leading, which I think we're all experiencing with the impacts of climate change, and returning to a more embodied way of living and being has led me back into the idea of like cycles, as opposed to us moving in some sort of straight line.
Yes.
And just recognizing that things come back around, like, these lessons we return. I mean, I think that's on some level what a retrograde like time for any planet is about, like the kind of going back and reviewing what has happened and what lessons that we've learned, and having another opportunity, at least in my experience with this Venus retrograde, to encounter a familiar situation and then make a different choice. And I am really grateful for, people like Octavia Butler, who wrote about people moving towards liberation as an experiment, that it's not, there's not some like right or wrong. It's like we are trying different things. We know what we are doing hasn't been working, and that it's causing a lot of pain, and that it's moving us towards a place that is less liberated, where we feel more constriction, and we have less, more scarcity and less access to ourselves and to each other. And just making a different choice, like on some level guessing, but also perhaps learning from people who have lived differently, either around us or in our communities, our ancestors, and seeing what happens, and then continuing to move towards liberation based on the impact that we see from the new choices that we're making. And that kind of like understanding that has been helpful for, again, this ways that we've been conditioned into perfectionism and like needing to know what's right and wrong and always make the right choice. And there's just so much rigidity in that, and like, it doesn't feel like a creative process in the same way that, non-linearity and cyclical ways of seeing the world provide that space for creativity and curiosity, which to me, those are the things that make me feel alive and give me energy. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Another word you said the word integration, and that when you said that, it felt connected, to the idea of fractals, and also to the way that nonlinear ways of moving through the world can lead us to unexpected things. Like, I can remember, like, at the beginning of my journey with plant medicine, for example, which started, probably back in 2006, like, quite a while ago, that I came to plant medicine, to learning about plant medicine, because I was trying to heal myself, because I was going down this very linear kind of critical, or this very linear path with Western medicine, which wasn't designed for me, especially in the United States, where my pain and my, struggle to feel good or to feel healthy was just being dismissed and not taken seriously. And that is a historical trauma, you know, collective trauma that Black people with wounds and many other people, particularly in the US, but many people who experienced their ancestors being colonized by Western Europeans, particularly Great Britain, like just we have a shared experience of not having our pain be seen as valid or as real or as worthy of treatment. And that is how I found my way to plant medicine, because the first person who ever took my pain seriously and said, like, this is not normal. It's not just like, you know, a cost of having a wound to just be in pain all the time. And that there is support and help for that, and you don't have to live like that, was an herbalist that I met, that a friend introduced me to, and it opened up a whole other world of this relationship that we can have with plants and with the land, where I really feel that the plants want to support us, they want to heal us, and they want to be in conversation with us, because I think that some of the plant species also need healing, and that we have the opportunity to provide that for them as well through, you know, holistic cultivation and those sorts of things. And then, you know, moving through that journey of plant medicine and then finding my way to ayahuasca in Peru, and encountering like the indigenous Shipibo people of Peru and their master plant, you know, the herbs that they work with in conjunction with ayahuasca, was a completely transformative experience for me. And I did experience profound healing that I know was ancestral healing. And I really felt that my ancestors had, in a very iterative way, like moved me towards that experience from the very beginning when I first found plant medicine in 2006. And that, I don't know, something about knowing that that was the first step of the journey, that I was moving towards healing myself, you know, that I wasn't looking for like a job, you know, I wasn't trying to, you know, get any sort of status. I just was like, I don't want to be in pain, and having this beautiful journey with plant medicine that actually has relieved me of a great deal of my physical pain, as well as other, you know, emotional and psychological pain, and really has transformed my experience of being alive. I think is it has felt in some ways like a fulfillment of a dream that my ancestors probably have had for a long time, with these illnesses that have been being passed down in our lineage for generations because of that trauma from that they experienced during enslavement and during the trafficking of people from Africa to the Americas. Very, really powerful, really, and wonderful experience of actually feeling integration, which is, you know, that's something that people talk about as like something you do after a psychedelic journey, which is important. But for me, actually just encountering the medicine felt like a kind of integration on a somatic level in my body.
Gosh, I really appreciate you sharing that. And it does, even though, you know, I don't know as much about astrology, but I know little bits. But as you had mentioned before about Chiron in your 8th house, if this feels, just from where I sit, what I know, I'm like, this feels very Chiron in your 8th house, like healing your own, these deep ancestral wounds, this ancestral trauma that was showing up in your body as pain. And like,
for sure. Yeah, I do feel a lot of validation and looking at my chart and seeing Chiron there, and also my
Yeah.
Scorpio rising, which it can be a really intense placement. And just knowing that, my Chiron is in Gemini. And so there is something that's kind of like intellectual about it, wanting to like research cures and healing, and like collect a lot of information. And that is certainly something that I've done. And now feeling that particularly after my experience with ayahuasca and the 6 months of integration I've had since, knowing that there also was something that ancestors were leading me to there, where I have the opportunity to share that healing with others, and to let them know, like to be a trailblazer in a way, for people in my community, that there is profound healing that's available to us. And that's part of where I'm at now, where I'm like, okay, now that I've received all of this and I have this extra space and this energy, I do feel just like a feeling of being compelled to share, and to make a way for other folks who are Black and brown bodies of culture who have experienced similar, ancestral traumas, to that, like, there is help. I remember in one of my ceremonies that was the most intense, I had this feeling in my body, particularly like in my shoulders, of like relief, knowing that the help that my ancestors had been waiting for finally arrived. It's like, we're here, we made it, help is here. And that's really how I felt like being in the care of Indigenous peoples in Peru. I was like, you, and not only the Indigenous people who are so generous with their healing, sharing that with us, but also of the land, of the Amazon, the rainforest, and the abundance there, and just being able to relax and be like, you come here for healing, and the help is here. And I could feel that, like the kind of almost like collective relief of my ancestors in my body, and like the relaxing of my shoulders, and just being like, okay, we don't have to keep holding it all together now. Like I can, this is a place where I am able to let go of a lot of those things that our bodies have just been holding and passing down for hundreds of years.
There's something like that's just coming up in me that of I don't know how this will come across, but like something of like being chosen, being the chosen person to go on this journey, a physical journey, to a different country, but then a mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic journey.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, and I know that these two particular ancestors are thrilled that I remembered, because they both have their sun in Leo, and it is Leo season. And these are some ancestors that appeared in some of my visions, and while I was in ceremony for 2 weeks in Peru with ayahuasca and other plants. And they and some other ancestors did share with me, like, that they had been waiting for me, for hundreds of years, and they were grateful that I listened, that I followed my curiosity. And there was one ancestor in particular who was a midwife, who appeared in one of my ceremonies where I was experiencing having what it felt like, and I experienced it as like a spiritual surgery that the shaman was doing to remove an energy from my womb, like trauma from my womb that I know was ancestral, and I know what ancestor specifically was like, this is mine, from the 1800s, like, and I was able to see her, and then, that I was struggling to remove this, like I couldn't on my own strength remove it, and the shaman was working to remove it, and then calling for help from an ancestor whose name is Leona, and
Leona,
having,
like this was a Leo.
yeah, so there's
okay?
Leona, and then
Okay.
there's and oh no, this is what blanking on. They're both of their names starts with an L. Lorena and Leona. So Lorena is actually the midwife, so I misspoke. Leona is her daughter. Who they're both Leos, and but Lorena is a midwife, and there was a midwife, and shared with me that that's where I inherited some of my skills for plant medicine from her, because she was a medicine person and a midwife, and she came to assist me in removing this energy because she was a midwife. And so she came and did her thing, and then I felt that energy, that trauma energy leave me, and it was like I ended up laughing, like it was removed from me, and I was just laughing because I felt it was just laughing in relief. Because I felt the absence of whatever that energy was, and I could hear my ancestors cheering, and that's when they were like, we've been waiting for you, like you did it, like, and I was just like, wow, this is amazing, and I did very much feel like the center of attention, and like I had been chosen, which is something that has historically made me uncomfortable. Like I haven't liked being the center of attention, but in that moment I felt very, very proud. And that also does feel like an embodiment of that Leo energy.
Leo,
Yeah, I did that, and I'm proud of it. I'm gonna receive this praise that's coming from my ancestors in celebration of this journey that they led me on, and that I, consented to, because I did have to make the choice to move in the direction that I was being called. It felt like a really powerful moment, because I think sometimes those of us who in our family are the, people breaking intergenerational curses, or actually naming the intergenerational trauma that runs in our family, sometimes we can be scapegoated and not celebrated by the people who are here now. And so it felt really validating to be like, well, regardless of what my birth family, feel about my journey, my ancestors, this host of the people that I've come from are happy and celebrating, and they're saying, we've been waiting for you. And that there was something healing even just about that part of the vision and Sarah in the ceremony, just knowing they're proud of me and that I had their support. And I want that for all of us who, feel that call. And I think in the work I'm doing now, like moving towards like combining somatics and art, whether that be, for me, it's cooking, creative cooking, painting with flavors, I like to call it. And or whatever kind of art that people choose, like having some way of like creating in the process of release. It has been really powerful for me, and especially as someone who I identifies as a trauma survivor, a survivor of CSA, and like I'm working with a friend who also has that background, and so we're like, how do we you know, as people with wounds, people of color with wounds, like how have we been healing, and how do we share what we are healing, how we're healing, and share what we're learning with other people. And it does really feel like, you know, this weird moment of, like Grace used to say, like, we're the ones we've been waiting for.
Yes.
And I feel excited because I know how transformative this journey with plant medicine, with somatics, with this community, with somatic abolition has been for me. And I know each of us have our kind of, you know, our way of moving forward in our own unique way that we've adopted the somatic abolition and our own somatic practices in the collective. And I feel excited to hear what everyone else is doing, and excited to be in a place where I'm like, okay, this is, the ancestors led me through this place. I had my phoenix moment of like bursting into flames and then being reborn, which was a very public experience actually, and even within our somatic abolition cohort, you know. And now being in a place where like, okay, I did that. Ancestors are proud of me. I have learned a great deal, and I'm really eager to share and help other people along, you know, walk alongside them on their path to heal from these things too, because they don't have to, these things that we've experienced don't have to be the determiner of our outcomes. Yeah, and there's more support for us actually. I think with the support of plant medicine and psychedelic medicine with mushrooms, then we maybe immediately have access to in our families of origin. Sometimes that can feel limiting, but it's like we all come from somewhere, and we have many ancestors, and if we're feeling pulled towards these things, it's probably because, you know, there's a way that we have an ability to offer healing for our line through our own pursuit of liberation and healing for ourselves.
So much, yes.
Thanks for letting me share that.
Yes, of course. I appreciate also that, because I know in your bio you mentioned plant medicine, like your work as an herbalist, but you also mentioned food, just curious about. But now to hear that that's going to come through, so this somatic food creation like experience, I'm very intrigued.
Yeah, I think it's part of the way that I, you know, I think of embodied art and creation. It transmutes the energy of my pain and the wound into something that nourishes me, and that's medicine. And that's what, for me, cooking has been a way to nourish myself and to use my creativity in a way to all that not only nourishes me, you know, because my medicine is for me first, and I feel very clear about that. I was given what I need to heal myself, but that also my medicine is healing for others. And apparently I'm a very good cook. And so people like my food and feel nourished. And you know, I do see food as medicine in that way. And that's just my way. I think we all have different ways. I think everyone can be creative, you know, and I think it's really important for those of us who have had parts of our identity, like either like in some ways what feels like taken from us, you know, by violence, to be able to reclaim our creation energy in a way that is generative and healing and nourishing for us, because it does radiate out from us. And it, I think we part of what I am hoping in this work that I'm doing with somatic arts, specifically for survivors, for, you know, Black bodies, and focusing on Black and Asian bodies, because those are the people who are facilitating, you know, in this collaboration, that those of us with wounds we have that creation energy in us, whether the womb is there or not, that space is there, and that we have the ability to transmute the wounding into something that is nourishing. And if we choose to do that, and that's all, with our consent. But it feels exciting to me to be able to reclaim that aspect of myself.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm wondering if I do want you to share like where people can find you and
Yes.
what you're working on, but I wonder if there's anything else that really wants to be shared with regards to, well, burning boxes or anything that we've talked about that you feel isn't quite complete yet.
No, I think I feel like I've said what I'm feeling pretty complete, and I'm really open to sharing where folks can find me.
Yes.
So my website is www.emergentphoenixrising.com. Emergent Phoenix Rising, and that the Phoenix imagery has resonated with me for a long time, and I think that's probably related to my Scorpio rising. And right now I'm not on other social media platforms, but there is a contact form through my website for anyone who wants to get in touch with me. And soon there will be some social media. I have someone who's supporting me with that, because I just find social media to be overwhelming on a personal level. And so we'll be working, if folks are interested, for example, in the combination of the somatic and art, and do identify as survivors in some way, that they can reach out to me and find out more about that course, that workshop that we'll be doing. That'll be 6 weeks. And we're looking for, sponsorship as well for that, because what I would like to see is that people who are participating are able to participate regardless of an ability to pay, but also, honoring the fact that, our ancestors were required to labor for free. And so we need to be compensated so that, the facilitators can continue to meet our own needs. But it doesn't mean that the people that we're walking alongside need to be the people who are providing that. And so if folks are interested in supporting that work, then they can reach out to me as well through my website.
Absolutely. And I learned just the other day that having had many conversations with you related to astrology, that you offer some readings or something like that, right?
Yes. Thank you for remembering that. So in addition to the somatic and arts, I also am an herbalist. So I do herbal consultations, and that all of this is available virtually. And now that I'm moving more into Belizean bush medicine, I actually have even a broader repertoire of herbs that I am working with, in addition to like kind of North American and Western herbalism. And then I also do astrology readings, like birth chart readings, but I also do transit readings. So like talking about what's happening as far as like how the present movement of the planets is impacting someone's birth chart. So I approach it from both of those perspectives, and I do both of those on a sliding scale. So to keep it accessible for everyone who wants a reading. And I also want to say, like, part of, while I am working, and I think probably a lot of us are working on our boundaries around like doing free labor, even within our own communities, that I also really am deeply anti-capitalist. And so if there are, exchanges that we can make that are outside the realm of capitalism.
Mhm.
I'm really open to that as well, and actually really excited when people contact me
Yeah.
and are curious and creative, and like, how can we create some sort of exchange? And so
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's important to say, because I very much feel like the world is moving in a direction where money isn't going to be the way that we're exchanging energy with each other anymore, because it's not a stable way to, it's just not really serving most of us anymore, unfortunately.
Mhm.
And so, speaking of
Mhm.
astrology, I'm excited about Pluto and Aquarius, giving us some more
Yes.
room to
I
experiment and have some visionary
I
energy
I
towards how
knew
to move
that's what you were
forward.
referring to. I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
that's exciting.
Yes.
That's also about burning boxes. Yes.
Yes. Plutonian energy is definitely about burning
Yes.
boxes, and
Yeah.
Phoenix energy. So
Mm. Oh, I feel so full. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing. I'm very lit up by your work and what you're putting out there. So part of this series is really, for me, it's like getting to have the conversations and also to share, because I feel like our community is amazing.
mm,
And so yeah, so I'm just voicing that I'm very happy in whatever ways I can to, like, share your work, your medicine. And I'm very grateful to be on this path with you and get to connect often.
same, me
And
too.
so
And I
it's a
feel,
gift.
yeah, I feel very, supported by, by you in that, and also by you collecting the information, so that all of us who are part of the community can hear what each other are up to and what
Mhm.
we're doing. And, I feel like there will be even more possible with that information out there, so that we can hear each other's stories and journeys and what's happening for us.
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you. And I feel excited by that too. It's like, even if our time as a group together has ended, like, I do feel that there's a lot moving and there's a lot of desire to stay connected.
Yes, for
Yay.
sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for listening and being a part of the Burn the Box movement.